Hey everyone, Assalamu alaikum. I am your teacher Bilal Kurd, and in today's lesson, I'm going to cover the toughest skill to improve so far seen in the responses of students, and that is evaluation. Because a lot of students in my teaching career over the past 10-12 years have expressed their discomfort when it comes to improving evaluation. So before I move on to what evaluation really is, before we dive down into the concepts of evaluation, let me first debunk some myths about what students at large think that evaluation is. First of all, I've seen that most students think that if, let's say for example, they're writing an advantage, so perhaps writing a disadvantage would become evaluation. In most cases, this may hold true, but I would still suggest that this should be a last resort. And I will teach you ways how you can evaluate advantage separately and evaluate a drawback separately as well. The next thing that students think evaluation is basically writing a summary of the points mentioned above in the conclusion, assuming it to be evaluation. That is not evaluation at all. So in a 12-mark question, regardless of whether it is A2 or AS, you have the marking distribution like this. So evaluation in itself stands for 6 marks. 6 marks. So it is not possible, not even realistic, to think that okay fine, if I were to summarize my answers, perhaps I will be doing evaluation. No. Summarizing your answers or summarizing your points will yield no marks at all. Alright? So first, let's move on towards discussing what are the common command words or the keywords that involve evaluation in responses. The first thing that you see questions with is perhaps the word evaluate. The most important function of the human resource department is to improve employee morale and welfare. Evaluate this view. So without a second thought, this is a question that would be of 12 marks because it's asking you to evaluate. And when the question asks you to evaluate, so what you're going to do is you're going to present different responses. Like how is a work-life balance important? What other functions are important? And then based on the arguments that you have discussed above, you're going to weigh what do you think is the most important argument along with your recommendation. Do you agree with the statement? Do you disagree with the statement? Or whether your judgment may be changed in different circumstances. Just like I've written here, does your judgment depend on anything, such as market research? I'll be focusing on this particular depend on segment in a later while. The next command word or words are recommend, advise, or discuss. Now, the examiner doesn't expect candidates, when it comes to questions of discuss, the examiner doesn't expect candidates as such to come up with a recommendation. Such questions do not require a judgment. But I would still advise that you can mention your judgment if you want, because that can stand as a benefit for you when the examiner is marking your script. Alright? So these are pretty much the words that would ask you to evaluate a certain question given by the examiner. Now for the drills and for the exercises. The common comments that reflect evaluation. If you have seen my video on analysis, if you haven't, please do check it out. If you have seen my video of analysis, you would have seen that I mentioned some of the conjunction words, some of the connecting words that can reflect analysis in your answers, right? So once you write that particular statement, it is natural for you to be going into that zone where you will be evaluating your answers, where you will be analyzing your answers, right? Likewise, when we talk about evaluation, I'm going to give you certain statements that will help you to enter into that zone of evaluation. But before that, it is very important to note, for example, if you're writing an answer and these two are the paragraphs of the main body, and this is conclusion. So how I teach my students is that they need to evaluate their responses throughout. So for example, if this is point number 1 and this is point number 2, I would suggest that you evaluate this point separately in this paragraph, evaluate this point separately in this paragraph, and then bring an overall conclusion in the very end. So this means you'll be evaluating your answers throughout. I've often noticed students to leave evaluation for the end, but that is very dangerous. Evaluation in a 12-mark question would comprise of 6 marks. And let's say for example you're short on time and you're just able to complete these 2 paragraphs and you left evaluation for the end. Imagine the horrors it would do. You leave 6 marks then and there. So don't do that. Evaluation is something, whether you're in AS or you're in A2, evaluation is something that has to be done throughout your responses, not just left for the end. So without further ado, these are the different comments that you can see that might help you enter into that realm of evaluating a particular point. So first of all, I'm going to start off with evaluating your paragraphs or the points that you mention in the main body of the answer. Whether or not this happens will depend on. The ultimate benefit or drawback will depend on. Like for example, if you think that, let's say, motivating labor force will help you provide a better customer service because workers will be more committed towards this task, which will result in customers being more satisfied or increasing loyalty, and you completed your analysis. But then again, whether or not motivated workforce will result in better customer service will depend on the level of skills that they have. Even if I am motivated to do something but I do not have knowledge of it, but I do not have enough skills of it, I won't be able to do it in absolute perfection. And that's the same thing. So does the benefit that you've mentioned, think of something that might happen that might reduce the intensity of the benefit that you've mentioned. Just like I explained in the example a while earlier. Likewise, if let's say for example you've mentioned a couple of advantages, so one of those advantages may stand out to be the most important for the business. So you can mention that, okay fine, apart from all other advantages, this advantage may be the strongest for this business because, and then you give a reason. Also, there's another statement. For example, if let's say the question is on mission statement, so you can mention that mission statement will only be important to the business if it considers itself accountable to its stakeholders, or if it's, let's say for example, a large scale business that is answerable to a lot of stakeholders, because then a mission statement will be very important because it would be expressing your reason of existence in front of so many people, right? So these are the different statements that you can mention at the end of the paragraph in order to evaluate your particular responses. And in order to help you with this, I'm going to teach you how to evaluate benefits and how to evaluate drawbacks separately. So let's, for example, you can see the color coding. Let's say, for example, discuss case 1A and discuss this point and try to evaluate this point as well. Alright, so we can clearly see that the benefit is if the business decide to recruit a senior manager externally, then this will result in new ideas and skills which could improve production processes by minimizing wastages, leading to increased productivity. You can clearly see a chain of analysis. And then again, I would remind you to watch the video on analysis in order to make yourself more familiar with how we develop a chain of arguments, how we develop a chain of analysis. So we are done with chain of analysis, and now comes the tricky part, and now comes evaluation. So once you have mentioned this benefit, I would want you to choose a statement from the common statements. Choose any statement that you think you can fit in this particular paragraph. Like for me, I would choose primarily the first or the second, because the case A indicates that the business is trying to recruit an employee who is external to the business, right? and indicating that, okay, fine, this will result in new ideas and XYZ. Now, how would I evaluate this particular scenario? I would first mention, however, whether or not this happens will depend upon. What would happen that I may not be able to get the benefit of new ideas and skills from that particular employee. Let's say, for example, whether or not I get the benefit will depend upon how much I keep the new employee motivated in my business. For example, if let's say I talk about hiring a teacher from the external world. So I've hired a teacher and I'm expecting new ideas and skills, but I do not give the teacher creative liberty to act on his own and to teach via his own teaching methodologies. I don't give him that liberty. I instruct him to follow a certain method. So even if I'm hiring someone from the external world, I will not get the benefit because I'm not giving the staff the creative liberty it requires. So whether or not this benefit will be obtained by the business will depend upon the extent to which, you can mention it as a separate point as well, the extent to which creative liberty is given to staff to implement their own ideas. Alright. Now, in another scenario, for example, consider a chef being hired in the restaurant from external means. So the chef has told you that, okay, fine, I will introduce new ideas and new recipes, and your restaurant only specializes in Oriental style of cooking. I would introduce Italian style of cooking and different dishes and XYZ. But in order to do that, you need different equipment. So, for example, you are launching tacos and pizzas, you'd need, different kind of cooking range, ovens. Imagine if your business lacks resources. Imagine if a teacher has told you that I will be using technology to facilitate student learning, but your school or your institution lacks these resources. Will the teacher be able to implement his new ideas? No. So another comment, it would also depend upon the availability of resources in the business. So whether or not this benefit received will depend upon. Mind you, I have not mentioned any drawback of external recruitment, because most students would just write, however, hiring someone from the external means would prove to be costly for the business because it would result in high cost of job advertisement and then selection criterias and XYZ. But mind you, not even once I've mentioned any kind of drawback. No, I did not. So I'm evaluating benefits separately. And in order to further clear your understanding regarding evaluation, let me take you to another case, case B. And case B states, if Rehan decides to lower the prices of his products, then this will result in demand to increase and it will be more affordable for the customers to buy his products. And then you can continue with the chain of analysis if you want. Then again, however, whether or not this happens, whether or not customers do come to Rehan because of lower prices will depend upon. Will depend upon what? The reaction of competitors. What if competitors have reduced prices way below than that of Rehan? Or what if the price reduction by Rehan is not that significant? If let's say, for example, the existing prices charged by Rehan were $7 each and Rehan has now reduced it to 6.9. So even though he has reduced the price, but it's not that much of a significant difference. So much would depend upon the extent to which prices are being reduced, or the reaction of competitors, or the brand loyalty of competitors. Many customers out there are not price sensitive, are not price conscious, and they keep buying from the same business because they are attracted by the other elements of marketing mix, such as product, such as promotion, such as the mere convenience of availing something. So however, whether or not this happens will depend upon PED of Rehan. If you are lowering your prices and you have an inelastic PED, I'm sorry, your revenue will not increase. Rehan's objectives, reactions of competitors, other elements of the marketing mix. So I would suggest to include at least two evaluative comments if you're evaluating your benefit or if you're evaluating your drawbacks. Any two will be enough. So any two per paragraph, if you're making two paragraphs, any two per paragraph would make 4 evaluative comments in total. And then 2 evaluative comments in the conclusion would help you gain 6 marks. So there's another case, and this is an exercise for you. Let me know in the comments, because in the analysis video as well, I was very pleased to see students coming up with their own different chains of analysis, and that is basically the best way to improve and to reinforce whatever you've learned in my video. So case C, I'll read it out for you. One way to achieve efficiency. Efficiency is minimizing inputs while maximizing outputs, such as labor productivity is a form of efficiency. So one way to achieve efficiency would be to introduce JIT, just in time, because just in time will help the business, and then you're developing a chain of analysis, minimize storage costs and XYZ and XYZ. But we quickly skip to the evaluated part. So however, whether or not JIT is successful in achieving efficiency will depend upon. Let me know in the comments, what do you think would be the evaluative comments in case C? And then I'll give you my feedback in comments as well. Alright, so these were the scenarios where we were evaluating benefits, but obviously it would be quite better if I were to teach you how to evaluate drawbacks as well. And to be very honest, it's the same structure. For example, let's discuss this case D. One of the drawbacks of niche marketing is that there is an increased risk of large-scale competitors entering the market, which may be a problem because it would lead to, and then you complete your chain of analysis, right? But remember and note how I have written this statement, because this statement would eventually lead me into that realm, into that zone of evaluating my drawbacks. So whether or not my business comes at a disadvantage because of large scale competitors will depend upon how strong my brand loyalty becomes with customers. Because if I am a small business, I will have the benefit of offering individual service, of catering to each customer personally. And despite large scale businesses offering services at lower prices, many customers look for individual experience and are ready to pay higher prices. So much would depend upon how well the business has developed strong customer loyalty. And then you continue it. You need to explain it. Just do not state this. You need to explain it. Or the type of product service offered, since some products are better when offered on a small scale with personalized service, such as hairdressing, such as customized cakes. Alright? So whatever the question is, you would need to make sure that you apply your evaluative comments in the context of the business. And remember that evaluation will become a part of questions that are 12 marks or higher. You are not required to evaluate an 8-mark question. Another example when you will be evaluating drawbacks would be, even though team working has a lot of benefits, teams can develop a set of values and attitudes which may conflict with those of the organization itself. However, whether or not this happens will depend upon how can you minimize the impact of this drawback. How can you reduce the intensity of this drawback? Perhaps if your teams are given clear objectives and goal to work towards, they may not be misled because they will have a direction and a deadline. So if, for example, the objectives that you tell your teams are smart enough, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and time bound, your teams may not be misled and they will focus on the issues at hand. Likewise, how frequently their performance is assessed and measured. Because if they know they are going to have a follow-up on their performance, they will have reduced chances of being astray from the main goal, from the main objective, right? So now we are evaluating the drawbacks as well. What would happen? That the intensity of the drawback may reduce, or the drawback may not remain a drawback at all. And likewise, just as I did for the evaluating benefits section, I have another exercise for you, and that is evaluating drawbacks as well. So this is case F. I'm just going to read it out for you. Let me know in the comments along with the indication that you are giving the answer for case 1F. Taking out a loan to finance the purchase of a new machinery will result in an increase in interest cost for the business. This is likely to reduce the profits available for future expansion or payment of dividends. However, whether or not or the extent to which this remains a drawback will depend upon. Meaning, the extent to which your profits reduce by the interest payments will depend upon. Let me know in the comments what do you think and what would be the likely evaluative comments. Alright, so whenever you are mentioning either benefits or limitations, which usually is what the examiner expects you to do, you can evaluate benefits separately and drawbacks separately. Keep in mind that from the main body of the paragraphs, you have to make sure that you somewhat collect around 4 marks for evaluation. So 4 comments would suffice. Once you have evaluated the points or the paragraphs that you mention, now is the time for conclusion. Do not summarize. Please do not do that. You're wasting your time. So how do we tackle with the answer evaluation or the conclusion evaluation? For example, there is one scenario where you are asked to discuss multiple things. Like for example, the most important role of human resource management is to improve employee morale and welfare. Naturally, it may be an approach for most of the students out there to discuss first how employee morale and welfare is important, and then discuss perhaps how recruitment and selection is an important objective, or how training and development is an important objective. Now, what you have done is you have discussed multiple options, or multiple methods, or multiple ways, or multiple functions. And if in your answer you are going to be the judge for it yourself, if in your answer you have discussed multiple things, right? So in the conclusion, what you're going to do is you're going to cherry pick one thing that you find to be the most impactful for that business, one thing that you find to be the most important for that business. And I've written this instruction as well, that if you are required to discuss different ways, methods, sources in your answer, then you would have to eventually select one as the most important by showing priority of it over others. And things obviously would be easy if I were to explain this with the help of an example. So exactly that's what I'm going to do. So let's say for example you have a question. I've solved this question in my classes as well. Discuss various ways through which a restaurant could improve customer loyalty. So in order to gain full marks, you can just mention 2 ways and that could suffice, because knowledge is of 2 marks in this question. So let's say for example, you discuss the possibility of obtaining feedbacks, and then you build a chain of analysis that fine, feedbacks would help us in, getting to know the areas of attention and concern, and we'll be able to improve on those areas, making sure customers return and XYZ and customers feel valued. And then you evaluated the feedbacks as well. That much would depend upon the way through which feedbacks are being taken. If the customers are being forced to give feedbacks, customers may be displeased, or if the feedbacks are too long, customers may not be serious when answering it, or so on and so forth. So much would depend upon, and you've evaluated. Likewise, you made another paragraph. For example, you made another paragraphs on the existence of loyalty cards or loyalty programs. And then you mentioned the benefit that fine, you'll be given points, and price conscious customers are likely to come to you because they will see discounts on products that they want to buy, XYZ. And if loyalty cards would be offered on occasions such as Christmas, Black Friday, Eid, Easter, then this would result, in a surplus of demand, especially from the price conscious customers. However, the extent to which loyalty cards improve customer loyalty would depend upon the choice of products available in the loyalty programs, because most of the times unpopular products which are not being sold normally are included at a discount under loyalty programs, and that would dissatisfy customers. Or perhaps the size of discount given in loyalty cards, if the size of discount is 0.5% or 1%, it may not please your customers as such. So you discuss feedbacks, chain of analysis, evaluation, point evaluation. You discuss loyalty cards, chain of analysis, point evaluation. Now for the conclusion. Now since you have discussed multiple ways, you discussed feedbacks, you discussed loyalty cards. Now what you have to do is you have to pick one thing. Now imagine if the business, the restaurant or the retail store came to you, the manager came to you and told you that I just have money and resources and time to pick one of these things, not both. What would you suggest me to do? So let's say for example, if my advice would be that take feedbacks. So my manager or the restaurant manager in front of me or the retail store manager in front of me would ask me, why feedbacks over loyalty cards? Why feedbacks and not loyalty cards? Now mind you, in the entire answer, you discussed the benefits and the evaluative comments for feedback separately. You discussed loyalty cards benefits and evaluative comments separately, but not even for once, you compared how feedbacks will be better than loyalty cards. And perhaps this is something that you need to do in your conclusion, showing priority of this over this. Because if you think this is the most important thing, how is it better than loyalty cards? For an example, I may suggest that feedbacks would help the business determine the true areas of concern. And in most cases, it may not be the high prices that the retail store is charging. It may be that the staff is unskilled and does not provide complete information. Or it may be something, for example, something related to the choice of meals in a restaurant, or perhaps the restaurant ambience. Whereas loyalty cards would only solve the issue of customers who are price sensitive. But what about the customers who do not mind paying high prices but are interested in other elements of the marketing mix? So feedbacks would not only solve the problem of price conscious customers as loyalty cards do, it would help you to solve problems that are far beyond the pricing issues. And therefore, feedbacks would be really important and would be far better than loyalty cards. So this is how you show priority. So let's say for example, if you were asked to discuss the various ways through which motivation can be improved, and you made one paragraph on salary and you made another paragraph on, let's say, performance related pay or profit sharing. Now in the conclusion, if let's say for example you are choosing PRP, you're going to tell that how PRP is better than the salary that you mentioned here. What benefit in PRP outweighs all the benefits mentioned in the salary? The most important point. And in order to improve your understanding, I've left a last exercise for you. So you have case 1C, you have case 1F. This is evaluating drawbacks. This is evaluating benefits. And then the last exercise for you, let me know in the comments, and that is 2A. Discuss whether reducing prices would be the best method for an automobile manufacturer in order to increase market share. What would your conclusion be? Just let me brief you that you are going to make one paragraph as to how reducing prices would help you increase market share, and as to how reducing prices won't be able to help you increase market share. Likewise, you're going to mention another method as well. That can be, let's say for example, improving your product perhaps through a unique selling point, or that can be, let's say, making your availability more accessible and giving consumers greater convenience when buying. That could be related with place, or let's say focusing on more targeted promotion. You can make any particular paragraph. Now in the conclusion, you're going to choose amongst these two, what do you think is the most important and why? So let me know in the comments, if you were to evaluate this question and make a conclusion paragraph, how would you conclude it? So this is pretty much what evaluation is all about. Yes, if let's say for example you're given a case scenario, then you can obviously dive into greater detail. You can mention any information that you find very important and that seems to be absent from the case. While mentioning, had it been provided, answers could have improved. Or if you are given, let's say for example, a table of financial information, you can perhaps comment on the overall authenticity of that particular table, such as in case of cash flow forecast. So I hope that you will be able to improve with your evaluative skills. Do practice questions, do go through questions. If you're done practicing your questions, do go through questions and just quickly skip to the evaluative part and tell yourself, like read it out loud, okay fine, if I were to mention this drawback, how will I evaluate it? If I were to mention this benefit, how would I evaluate it? If I were to make a conclusion, which will be the most important point and why? You can even discuss, do these kind of exercises with your friends as well. The better you make yourself more aware with the dynamics of evaluation, the better you're going to get at it eventually. Let me know in the comments if you like this video and if you want any other topic to be assessed on. Thank you so much and happy learning.